and welcome back to our program. Today we are lucky enough to have Monica Jiang from Berlin. Today we are going to talk about how to build a beautiful business. And in particular, we will also touch on sustainability, social activism, and inclusivity. So welcome to the program, Monica.
Thank you so much for having me. Very happy and excited for this.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, I'm Monica. I'm 30 years old, just turned 30 a few weeks ago. I live in Berlin. I grew up in the south of Germany with Chinese parents from the north of China who, migrated here more than 30 years ago. A little bit of a longer family history that I'm not gonna go too much into, but I had a German great grandmother who is kind of the reason why parts of our family then ended up back here. I studied media and communication management and always pursued a career in, like marketing or something that sounds like fancy and cool and it's like straightforward business. And career was always, something that I really wanted to aspire above anything else. Having grown up with this idea of a day that is not productive is a wasted day.
Yeah.
So also very much a Chinese stereotypical cliche perhaps, but it's also true, at least in the case of me. Went on to explore a few different realms and environments through internships and first work experiences where I increasingly got frustrated with the way and the status quo of corporate life and way of doing things, and then ended up at the House of Beautiful Business, which I'm now part of since more than 3 years. So I run curation and community.
I was curious in terms of why you actually changed from marketing to now. Can you go a little bit into that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know why, but like I always had this vision of working in advertising and coming up with all of these great ad campaigns for expensive, luxurious brands. At least I remember that. And I always was like, I would love to also see more Asian women represented because, growing up in Germany, but then also traveling to the US and I was like, there are not so many that look like us, as in me and my sister. That was always the idea somehow. And then I actually started working in marketing departments of both larger corporates and then agencies as well. I realized that the pure nature of work and the reason why people go to work and how organizations are structured so rigid and so freedomless was frustrating to me in the sense that it kind of took this illusion that I still had of doing something meaningful and impactful with the work that I wanted to pursue, realizing that a lot of these ways that people end up in these positions, especially powerful positions, and the decision-making processes are dominated through ways that didn't really make sense to me and that didn't necessarily came from a place of trying to do something purposeful and rather, just ending up in a place and doing things because that's how things have been done the past few years or decades, more so coming from a place of comfort, less so caring or doing the extra work and questioning maybe also if this is the right way to do things and if this actually makes sense and why are we even here and why am I here in this position and in this organization and what are we trying to do. So all of that was very much a disenchanting experience for me, coming in as a very, as a young, naive, very idealistic person into the world of work, thinking that business is the place where I can drive change, and then realizing, maybe not so much.
It sounds like purpose is really important to you in terms of how you spend your time in your life. Why is it important to you?
I think because it gives me a reason to exist. Sounds very broad and grand in a way, but it's true. That's what I ask myself. Like, what can I do today that will not necessarily make a difference or like change the world? That's not really the point, but that is in the pursuit of something that is greater than myself and my needs and my immediate benefits and goes beyond that. That's part of the way that we as humans make meaning out of our lives and give us an excuse or a reason to exist and lead the lives that we do, and not merely exist without greater contribution.
This leads to my next question, which is the purpose of business to you. When you think about businesses in society, what do you think the purpose of them are?
I would love them to be places of meaning and belonging and emotional intimacy. I would love them for them to be places where people go not only to fulfill their personal purpose and contribution to something larger, but also to find others that they might not agree with all the time, but that help them to outgrow their minds, their thinking, their ways of looking at the world, and feel less lonely in this world, becoming places that are transient and fluid. So I'm speaking of organizations and how they're structured, giving people different ways and a multitude of ways how they can contribute, learn continuously, and through that, hopefully make a positive impact on society and our environment. And we see that business is moving more and more into more of a role than just, giving your monthly paycheck or just being there for economical reasons, because there are so less spaces to find all of these things as belonging and meaning. With religiousness being less of a thing, declining birth rates and demographic change, not all of these things, I think businesses and organizations can become these places more.
So I'm going to be devil's advocate and say, sometimes people think work should be work. And maybe some people think, oh, you can get your spiritual, your satisfaction, your friends, diversity through your social life. So why try to enforce that or try to drive that in business?
I think to me, it's more of a coming together and coming closer of what we define as there's work, there's social, there's personal life, of all of these different spaces that we categorize and have been categorizing in this way. I think it's a coming together of a more amorphous structure of all of these things that influence each other. What we define as social life or personal life inevitably also influences the way that we interact as professionals, or in our workspaces, and vice versa. We should also consider different boundaries to define, okay, this is how far I want to go, this is how far I want to share, and this is how I want to show up. But it doesn't need to be limited one single category. I don't think that works anymore.
So you work with lots of different companies. Do you have a good example or examples of companies that you think is doing a wonderful job in building what you call a beautiful business?
I think yes. So the House of Beautiful Business works with different organizations in order to bring in this idea of beautiful business. We do that on different levels. One is really to start an actual honest conversation about beauty and business. So one example is that we are working with BCG and the BCG Henderson Institute. So they're a think tank, and produced sort of a series on beauty and business in conversation with CEOs from different corporations around the world in order to give that visibility and ignite a conversation around, does that go together? Beauty and business in the realm of sustainability challenges and climate change and social issues and all of these things. How do we make room for beauty, as in leadership embracing, for example, a range of emotions, or creating space for non-transactional or non-targeted initiatives around exponentially growing things? That's one example that is more on the narrative story level. We also worked with a Portuguese insurance company called Ageas Group. They're Belgian, but we worked with a Portuguese branch. They formed a new position actually for a beautiful business manager. So someone who's between what we would call HR, like people culture, and internal processes, and someone who specifically looks at how can we bring beautiful business into the way that we work and into the way that we design our processes and structures, and how we also show up in terms of our shareholders. There's other examples that are on an individual level, how leaders show up themselves. And then I think There are on a more structural level for how you can rethink business models and business at itself. Companies like ShareTribe, a Finnish company that have organized themselves as a steward-owned company. So steward ownership basically means that the ownership structure is independent of external shareholders, which is quite radical in the day and age that we live in. And they're continuously trying to uphold the standards that are tied to this concept, to this model, which is more common in Europe or has been more common in Europe and now is beginning to expand into other realms, which is great to see because it's such a practical legislative structure that cannot be changed and just holds companies accountable to serving their mission and serving their purpose and nothing else. Us2, which is a game design studio that just changed to becoming an employee-owned company, a similar movement that makes beautiful business very concrete to me. Yeah.
Are there certain industries that you think are more ready for this kind of creative thinking?
I mean, probably those that are most under threat of not existing anymore if they don't change. So whether that is the mobility or automotive sector, energy sector is interesting. What is happening right now with a push towards renewable sources, and of course with the war that creates totally different dynamics. So those who are facing an actual existential threat, but also seeing in terms of talent, it doesn't cut anymore to have a shiny brand that might have stand for something but doesn't do much in this day and age. I think younger generations specifically are looking for meaning, for purpose, for a place that is actually socially and like ethically, but also specifically responsible and woke and tries to have these conversations and has more progressive ways of understanding leadership and organizational structure.
So just say I knock on your door tomorrow and I say, Monica, I need your help to make my company more beautiful and responsible. So where would you start?
I mean, start start where it hurts, I guess. Hurts the most. So I mean that you can find that out through conversations on all the different levels of the organization itself. Leadership usually has an idea coming from somewhere, like some place that's probably not entirely wrong, but I think it's so important to hear from other levels as well, especially if it's a history, like how long has this company has been going, what have been some of the major events that have been happening in the past months and especially 2 years. What has changed? What is maybe some pain points that can be identified and put into a holistic context in order to understand the interrelations and effects that some of these things might have, and then define where do we start without expecting that there is a right way to start, and then to also identify if are we the right ones to help or actually does it need other players to come in. And that's also something in terms of a more collaborative, decentralized way of solving problems, I think that we're hopefully moving towards. Not one company will change anything in the system. It always needs different ways that are acting on different levels of a system in order to change something over time. The idea of beautiful business as a concept is obviously very grand and elusive on purpose. So it gives you room for also trying to imagine what it could be in your case, in your company, in your context.
Most companies will only improve the things they can measure. Do you see any new ways of measuring the more hard to measure elements of business?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because there's now currently this whole discussion around ESG metrics that has been bubbling up now after held as, hey, this is the new standard, this is new framework of how we measure, certify good business that cares about social, environmental issues and governance internally. Not to say that this can be ditched now, but what is interesting is just to see that because the whole system is still a capitalistic system, people involved in these things that want to benefit largely as investors and insurers. Perhaps these new frameworks might not be the right approach. So can we look at other ways of measuring that are not only quantifiable and a little bit more nuanced, which makes it hard to measure things because then it's always biased in a way. But speaking for us as the house, trying to create a new ways of establishing a feedback culture that is actually reciprocal, ongoing, and does not serve the purpose of having a dashboard, then award the top 3 and the top 5, or trying to, right, again, creating categories and hierarchies And through that, and reinforcing a certain power structure of what is good and what is not so good and what is bad, I think is one way to move forward. How can we have more meaningful conversations and less unnecessary meetings? Set intentional, emotionally intimate, and safe, but also brave conversations between leaders in our leadership team, rather than these masked performance reviews, say something but not really say anything. Are there ways to measure the sentiment of people's feelings and health within organizations without becoming entirely biofeedback based
Yeah.
company that has just dashboards about how your body is doing right now in the second, and what you're feeling, what you're not feeling. But I think there's something interesting there for sure, that where tech can help in a meaningful and elegant way. Can we understand organizations as organisms and bodies, and how would we measure that? What does it mean to have a healthy organization or a healthy team, and not only based, again, who shows up at the office, who quits, who doesn't? Of course, these are very hard metrics, but in which context and why? And I think that probably deserves a lot of more effort.
So I want to talk to you about social activism, climate change, inclusivity. Tell me about each.
If we talk about business and also personal contributions and purpose, in my view, it is impossible not to include a certain political wokeness and a certain way of being an active citizen in order to see, understand, and hopefully contribute to alleviating all of these social injustices that we see. And similarly, it is with environmental issues. I'm not an environmental activist. I would never call myself that. There's people who deserve this title much more so, but I'm trying to keep myself very much aware of how we as humans relate with the natural world, and also for business, how we can go beyond sustainability initiatives and lip service of measuring our impact through different metrics, but really getting into a way that is a more regenerative approach to the work that we do, the business models that we run. And through that is also a form of activism and a form of social activism. Those are two areas that I'm always trying to remind myself of. How can I show up, and how can I contribute? And also, how can we hold business accountable, including our own, of course, for inclusivity reasons and diversity reasons, and through the work that I do with the house, because I'm responsible for programming and sort of curating different ideas. I'm trying to more and more tap into the wisdom of our community and other people that we have, around ourselves, to enlighten myself of other perspectives and try to counter think in a way through them and their knowledge. How can we have a conversation that is not already out there and that is different and provocative, but also honors the other, communities and cultures that I'm not aware of, maybe even ignorant of? So that definitely helps in terms of collaboration and sharing and learning, always trying to practice this more intersectional approach of looking at the world.
Can you remember a time when someone really changed your view? What was the result of that?
Last year at the House of Beautiful Business and the main gathering, we invited an 8-year-old girl who is very much so an environmental activist. She challenged the House of Beautiful Business community to not even come up with a climate action or anything, but she challenged the House of Beautiful Business community that was in the room there in Lisbon, 300 people, and then more so online, to agree on one thing that they want to collaborate on within 45 minutes. Kind of a challenge. We thought of this experiment as something that will be very interesting to run without any facilitation. So we removed ourselves as hosts. We gave people a few random items to take from the desk, like a microphone and a card deck, water guns, and something else that was completely random.
Yeah.
and just watched what was happening. And what was happening, maybe not as a surprise, but still stuck with me until this day, is that no, people did not agree on something. Not even on something small as let's all jump into the air for like at one moment, together, or let's all sign something, or let's all post something, or not even that. But what happened was that more and more so people were trying to grab the microphone and make the case for their idea. Because, of course, everyone thinks, including myself, we're the smartest. Like, I have the solution. I'm going to organize this now because I do facilitation and I will now organize this chaos. And it became more chaotic and more chaotic and more chaotic. Really, lots of pent up energy of both also people leaving out of frustration. And this is such a sad example of why humanity is just incapable of doing anything. So after the event and having some time pass was to do a session online then to bring people back and just to say, well, what happened? What did you feel? What did you observe? What are you taking away from this? How can we learn? Just as an example of something. This is something that changed my mind in a way that it both reinforced some of my tendency to sometimes fall into this, oh my gosh, humanity is doomed. There is no, humans are just here out of self-interest. There is no meaning to greater life. We just exist to exist. Reinforce this sense. And at the same time, because I saw what was coming afterward, a project group was formed, actually, that we call Housework, that is now holding themselves accountable, meeting every month, then work synchronously on climate action on a personal, but also business level, seeing that, oh, there is definitely a willingness still to do something about this, and that we all live in this spectrum of ambiguity of trying to do better, but of course not having a green badge of certificate of being the best human being, but at least we still care and we still try. And that's the bottom line for me, to see that and to feel that was really important.
Your bio is very poetic. It seems like you're a very spiritual, soulful kind of person. Have you always been like this? Do you think a lot about meaning of life and purpose?
Yes. Yes. I've always been very much in my mind. It took me a while to find a way to express that and share it, and not to be shy or afraid, more so afraid to do that, in fear of being judged, right? Or being misunderstood. This sense of, I feel like a misfit. I feel like no one understands me. No one gets me. I'm not in this teenager kind of, but like, really, I feel so misunderstood. That is a sentiment that I can relate to a lot, because I felt that. I mean, I still do sometimes, but not so much anymore. I used to have that a lot. And then realizing it is largely because, well, firstly, I have to share more openly what it is that I think, and listen to other people's thought, and also that there are so many people who are in a way like-minded, unlike-minded.
You mentioned inclusivity quite a lot. Did something happen in your life that made you care about inclusivity that much?
On a personal level, having grown up as the only, sort of almost only, visibly foreign family in a quite small town in the south of Germany with Chinese parents, has definitely had an effect, and has always, I mean, still with me, of course, of always being very different. Not only how you how you appear and how you look, and how you define beauty, and I don't only mean like physical beauty, but just like beauty as a concept in and of itself. Therefore, also self-acceptance from very limited experience, but I do know what it feels like not to be included or not to feel included, even though you are. Also having the sensibility for other people, and seeing how fast people can exclude and not care and cancel or even just stigmatize people without knowing anything, really. And just, that coming out of a place of not knowing, that is something that I can relate to, and that I would love for us all to alleviate in a way.
We can probably exchange some stories after the interview.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing that. I do have 3 questions that we spoke about before. The first question is, tell us a story only you can tell.
Yes, so a story that only I can tell. That in 2018, 18, I had worked for a corporate organization for quite some time, then went onto an agency, first got in touch with this idea of the future of work can look differently, etc. And then 2018 gave myself a year of just exploring, what my next thing could be, freelancing and doing different things. I ended up in Brazil doing an event for a food and agriculture accelerator, which was amazing and it was a great experience. This whole year felt like so rushed in a way because it was kind of like running on adrenaline of trying to chase my next thing or whatever it could be, and giving a lot of energy in all of this, like 150%, because that's usually how I am and who I am. Is I dedicate myself entirely. If I believe in something, then there's no real limit. And then for some reason, during that week in Brazil, I realized that I was feeling entirely lost, that I did not know at all where I was running towards anymore. At that time, actually, I was engaged because also there, on a personal level, I thought I have this vision of myself. I want to get married. I want to have kids. Do I? I don't know, but I guess that's the way that things go. And I'm almost 27, so I see what my friends are doing. The time is now. And in that week, through encountering myself through another person, actually, I realized that I completely lost track of who I am, that I'm actually craving an entirely different realm of doing much more work that speaks to my creative soul. It was almost like a yearning for something that is out there and that I cannot touch and that I cannot even define. But that made me incredibly sad and frustrated and just confused, very confused. As life goes, I then in the next few months ended up ending my relationship that was very long, ending the idea of getting married as well, of course, and this whole vision that I had, and finding my way to the house. In that moment, I think I just completely lost a sense of myself. And through the house in the past 3 years, I have come closer and closer again to the person that I am. If I look at very, very old photos, and also we have videos that my dad used to make, like like these videos with an old camera thing, camcorder, for then my Chinese grandparents, because they could not, they couldn't see how we were growing up, me and my sister. So he started recording all of these videos. So if I look back at those, I see someone that I can relate to now again, so much more, because it's someone who loves to play and to dance and to sing and just to be out there, and also sits there alone telling herself stories about something that is just made up, without audience at all, just like to myself, in my imaginary audience maybe. So this is a very, very personal story that was, for me, an inflection point, where the House of Beautiful Business, where I then attended and also worked at in 2018, gave me a sense of belonging, of giving and reawakening the sense of, see what's out there. There's so much more. And here are so many people who are here to inspire you and to challenge you, to help you find a different direction of wherever you want to go.
And looking back, prior to this inflection point to now, what do you think you learned about yourself?
I think I learned to even more trust my intuition, my ability to sense. I think I always had that, just a sense of how people are, how they feel, and if this would be a good decision for me and the right one at the right time or not. That's something that I learned to lean fully into that. Whatever the result is, and not even caring about the result, but trusting that, and through that relating better other people's views is crucial, I think, to the way that I want to lead my life. Not only listen to people and talk to them and connect, but try to feel what they feel, not in the full intensity, but a little bit, because that helps me at least to understand. That's one thing. And the other thing that I learned, that I'm someone who is here to give a lot in terms of energy, in terms of bringing people together and creating the space for that. That's what I learned, what I can do best. and maybe what I'm here for is to do that. And it fits quite well with where I am right now with what I'm doing at the house and what the purpose of that is.
The second question is a lesson that has taken you a very long time to learn.
Yes. Okay, so back to the productivity thing. Productive day is a wasted day. Redefining what that means to try to reconfigure what makes one day actually impactful or meaningful. It's not related to the amount of hours, energy, quantifiable results that I'm doing with my work, but it's the intentionality, the conscious decision of doing some things at a certain moment, and in general finding a slower approach to my work and how I want to contribute, because I'm also someone who's usually at, how you can listen podcasts on or voice messages on speed of 1.25 or even faster. That's my usual speed. It's like 1.25. It's like always a little bit too fast, so that things tend to fall down. It's a little bit like that. And I used to feel that a lot, like this rush sense of like, I have to do so many things, I have to do this, and I just keep me busy so I can feel productive, so I can feel that I'm making something meaningful with my life, because otherwise, what's the point? There's no sense. And that has taken me a long time to understand that it's actually not about that at all. I can make a conscious decision with everything that I do and allow myself to have as much space and time to achieve the things that I want to achieve. It's much more about the energy and the presence of those moments that matters.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because intentionality is at the core of a beautiful business, and it's also at the core of responsible innovation. So I think that kind of loops very nicely back to the beginning. Now, I'm going to ask you the last question, which is about your vision for the future, in particular, your vision for 2050. What would you hope it to look like, feel like, and sound like?
Yeah, so 2050, I really hope that our Earth is going to be here, first of all, which I think it will. No, it will for sure. And I hope that we've made efforts in terms of decarbonization and energy transition to mostly regenerative power sources. I think that we're still battling with polarization on a political sense and radical formation of groups that might actually go more into the spiritual realm, renaissance of that, because people are so hungry for communities and belonging and meaning making. So I can see us still struggling with that. Basic income is a thing. Work is no longer, and not only 9 to 5, but work is synonymous to a multitude of ways how we want to contribute to society, whether that is paid or on a non-monetary way. So perhaps it's more in the sense of a sharing economy, or even a gift economy that says, hey, I'm doing this for you and you're doing that for me. Or we share things in terms of resource, and through that also bond in new ways. Definitely I could see that our cities have grown in a way that urbanization is full on. There are some cities and places in the world that do not exist anymore due to the effects of climate change. However, the city areas have expanded. The idea of a neighborhood is much more diversified, and not so much on a local level. We'll come to a point where living in multi-generational and multi-diverse constructs in terms of housings and everything become a reality, that not everyone is siloed in their own apartment anymore, and everyone owns a dishwasher and a washing machine. But that there's more of a shared communal sense of also how we define families, how we define communal living together. On a more system level, I do hope by 2050 that we've made our efforts towards regenerative agriculture, that we have amazing lab-grown meat for everyone who feels the desire to eat a really great steak, medium rare, which I would totally do. No more do we need the resource of actually killing animals for that. I think business and organizations are still on the way of becoming more beautiful. I hope that the idea of beautiful business will be ever evolving. It doesn't get to a point where there is a certificate or an end towards that, but the striving for whatever we in 2050 define as beautiful still is an ongoing conversation. But I hope that by that time we're on a different different level altogether, that business has become more socially and politically and ecologically conscious and active and more just. And maybe on an individual level, that I guess on a tech level, that we are not sitting like in the movie in Wall-E at home or in like some spaceship thing, ordering food and like not moving at all.
Yeah.
I hope in 2050, there are ways to still have amazing dance and music and art festivals and gatherings in ways that people energize themselves only with their bodies and with their minds. I hope on a personal level, opening people's minds of another world that can exist like this one that I just described, which is, I
Mhm.
know, very utopian on purpose, but that it exists and that we need these stories. We need these spaces to imagine. I think with the house, more so contributing with the discussions and the examples of businesses that strive to become beautiful. Yeah.
Well, I'm looking forward to being in 2050. I hope I'm still here. This year, I hope I'm still here. It's great that we have all these people now working towards that step by step and coming from all different type of directions with different methods. So thank you so much for your time, Monica. Really enjoyed the conversation and I hope we will get to have you again in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.